Suho roams the area inside the gate, noting the lifeless goblins scattered around. He realizes that these creatures, who had been rampaging outside as if the world was theirs, were actually fleeing from something within. As he examines the dead goblins, he hears a sound and considers the reason the goblins were running and why the gate is called Green-Red. Just then, two hobgoblins emerge, one at level 10 and the other at level 12. One of them shoves a dead goblin aside and points its sword menacingly at Suho. Standing his ground, Suho deduces that these hobgoblins see him as their prey instead of the weaker goblins. He also notes their red skin, larger frames, and stronger muscles, features that set them apart from ordinary goblins. The hobgoblin lunges forward, but Suho remains calm, thinking, it's still just a goblin. The hobgoblin seems momentarily surprised by his confidence and swings its sword, but Suho dodges by leaping back. He recognizes that his current level isn't high enough to pierce its tough skin, but spotting an opening, he crouches and springs forward, targeting the hobgoblin's weak point. He plunges his sword into its eye, and it shrieks in pain. Suho realizes that this tactic would be impossible if there were a huge level difference, or if the monster had vastly superior traits, but against a mere hobgoblin, it's manageable. After swiftly killing the hobgoblin, Suho feels a pang of disappointment, muttering that he took it down out of habit. He reminds himself to be more cautious with each encounter and make full use of his enemies until he finds others. As he smirks with confidence, the remaining hobgoblin, angered, charges at him in a frenzy. Suho dodges each attack with precision, remembering that if he repeats certain actions often enough, he can acquire a skill related to that action. The hobgoblin's relentless assault eventually results in it smashing the ground. Just as the system notifies Suho that he has mastered the dodge skill, he grins, pleased to have acquired dodge. Both fighters grip their swords tightly. Suho parries the hobgoblin's attack, reflecting on how parrying is a foundational skill, integral to more advanced techniques. He continues to parry each strike, and soon the system notifies him that he has mastered parry. Suho feels lucky to have gained this skill before the hobgoblin wore itself out. With the creature now vulnerable, he tightens his grip on his sword and decapitates the hobgoblin, ready to seek out more enemies. Surveying the area, he decides that it's time to start earning experience points in earnest. Meanwhile, outside the gate, a group of people watches. One man questions who dared to enter the gate without permission, wondering which faction he belongs to. Another man remarks that if Suho dies inside, it will become a legend, questioning who this bold intruder could be. Two men in suits approach the firefighter, asking if it's true that a beginner player entered the gate. The firefighter confirms, explaining that Suho had seemed new to being a player. He recounts how Suho had handled a group of goblins on his own, healed his wounds, and entered the gate with purpose, saying he had something to gain from it. One of the men in suits, astonished, remarks that despite arriving just minutes after the incident, Suho had already taken down the goblins and is a healer no less. He shakes his head, muttering that such a feat is unbelievable. One of the men in suits observes that all the defeated monsters thus far have been goblins, suggesting that the gate itself doesn't seem overly difficult. Still, he finds it hard to believe that a healer would attempt to conquer a gate alone, let alone take down so many goblins without a scratch. Skeptical, he mutters that this guy must have entered without fully thinking it through. There's no way a healer would be crazy enough to venture into a gate solo. However, he admits to himself that if this healer does manage to clear the gate, they'll need to act immediately. Turning to his partner, he instructs him to report any changes in the gate and to notify him the moment anyone exits. His partner agrees, and the man contemplates that if Suho succeeds, they must ensure he joins their faction. The scene shifts to Green-Red, where Suho is dashing through, quickly eliminating hobgoblins in his path. The system confirms each kill, notifying him of his progress. Suho tightens his grip on his sword and slashes through to a bunch of hobgoblin with one swing until only one remains. As the last hobgoblin reaches for its weapon, Suho kicks it away, making the creature tremble. Looking down at it, he says he'll let it go, on the condition that it brings back as many allies as it can. Terrified, the hobgoblin flees, and Suho calls after it, challenging it to bring reinforcements. While he waits, Suho considers distributing his stat points, deciding it's better to raise them evenly, rather than focusing on just one. With all the bonus points he's received from his kills, leveling up has come easily, and he has acquired most of the essential skills. Looking over the fallen hobgoblins, he mutters to himself that the item he needs should be around here. Striking one of the bodies, he finds a small magic stone and smiles, pleased by the discovery. Though he wouldn't have bothered with something so minor in the past, he figures the stone's value, about 50,000 won, will come in handy given his current lack of funds. Deciding to search more thoroughly, he collects all the magic stones, calculating that selling them would yield a decent profit. Suddenly, Suho senses movement. His wait is over. The hobgoblin horde has arrived. Counting roughly 30 of them, he notes that they'll provide a good source of experience points before he confronts the boss. Eyeing the group, he remarks that the hobgoblin has indeed brought a significant number of companions from the underworld. The hobgoblin leader, snarling, commands its troops to kill him. As the horde charges, Suho braces himself, then leaps forward, launching a powerful attack that cuts down several hobgoblins at once. The remaining hobgoblins retaliate, but he swiftly slashes through each one, leveling up as he gains experience. His stats increase by 1, along with an additional bonus point. Seeing the vast number of foes before him, he grins and declares that he'll finish this quickly. Suho then slices through the hobgoblins with ease, dashing forward to stab another as blood splatters around him. Amid the intense battle, he notices something ominous approaching. Suddenly, the boss of the gate, the chief hobgoblin, launches an attack. Suho blocks it, smirking as he remarks that the boss has finally arrived. Minutes later, a massive explosion shook the forest as the boss hobgoblin slammed its axe into the ground. Suho dodged the attack, but out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a hobgoblin attempting to ambush him from behind. Blocking its strike, he told it not to interrupt while the big guys are playing, and sliced through the creature instantly. Just then, the boss let out a deafening roar, and the system notified Suho that the chief hobgoblin was using a fear skill. Surprise! Suho felt his muscles go rigid, recognizing that he'd fallen under the skill's effect. He recalled that fear is a skill that induces terror, with its effects intensifying based on the user's level and stats. He hadn't anticipated encountering such an ability in a low-level gate, though it made sense for a boss monster to wield it. The boss, now smirking, prepared to launch another attack. Realizing he lacked any mental protection skills or items, Suho knew he couldn't counter the fear effect in the usual way. However, he remembered a different approach, one involving inflicting pain on himself to break free. Grabbing the blade of his own sword, he cut into his hand. The system then confirmed that he had broken free from the state of fear. That was close, he muttered, parrying the boss's next attack and catching it off guard, deciding to eliminate the smaller enemies first. He dashed forward and swiftly killed all remaining hobgoblins in green-red. Afterward, Suho used his healing light skill on his injured hand, watching as the system confirmed that the wound was healed. Clenching his fist, he turned to face the boss, who stared back angrily. Suho smirked and taunted, asking if they should have a cozy time with just the two of them. The battle between Suho and the boss began in earnest. Despite the difference in their levels, Suho fought skillfully, accumulating small but steady damage on the boss. He prepared his next move, targeting a small cut on the boss's leg. He aimed to exploit this weak point, intending to deal a fatal blow by repeatedly striking the wound. The boss roared again, attempting to use fear once more, but Suho dismissed it, knowing that fear wouldn't affect him now that he'd overcome it. He pulled his sword from the boss's leg and launched a series of relentless attacks, leaving the boss bewildered and reeling from the onslaught. Finally, the boss spat blood and collapsed to the ground. Approaching the fallen boss, Suho placed his hand on its head and cast healing light. The boss, confused, looked up at him. Suho told it to get up, saying he wasn't finished with it yet. Moments later, a series of notifications appeared, congratulating Suho on upgrading his diagonal/horizontal stab to Ranki. His cutting power increased by 30% and penetration by 50%. Grinning, Suho placed his hand on the boss again, casting healing light once more, which left the boss trembling in terror. Another notification confirmed that Suho's actions exhibited an overwhelming presence capable of intimidating even a boss monster, awarding him the skill Intimidation, now at rank A. He mused that mastering intimidation completed his skill set, and he smiled. Turning to the boss, Suho declared that his role is over and should go straight to hell. With one swift motion, he beheaded the chief hobgoblin, ending the battle. That's all for today, guys. See you on the next upload.